This video explains foods you need to avoid if you have an acute bout of diverticulitis. Diverticulitis is technically the infection itself, whereas diverticulosis is the abnormal formation of the pockets, which harvest the bacteria that causes the infection in the first place. So foods to avoid, first off, alcohol, very important one. If you have too much of it, it can really play havoc with your intestinal bacteria, and yeah, you want to avoid it. Also, foods high in FODMAP. This is some of the more recent research. It's not necessarily the gospel truth, but most of the doctors now are recommending you avoid foods high in FODMAP. FODMAP stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, disaccharides, monosaccharides, and polyols. Some examples of those, you've got some fruits such as apples, pears, and plums. You've also got dairy foods such as milk, yogurt, and ice cream. Fermented foods such as sauerkraut and kimchi. Beans, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and onions. Now, some would say that you would be best to avoid garlic. I find that's not necessarily the case. Just don't go. You can have garlic, but just don't have too much of it. In fact, garlic can actually be good for you, at least what I've found. But if you have too much garlic, it can throw off the balance of good and bad bacteria in your intestines. Avoid high fiber foods. They can be helpful in some cases, but if you have too much fiber, it can actually disrupt things in your intestines. Remember, one of the ways to heal or deal with diverticulitis is to have a balanced diet and not have too much of one thing or the other. Another very important thing to avoid is foods that are very high in sugar and fat, in particularly red meat, refined grains, full fat dairy, and fried foods. That's a given. Most of those are bad for you anyway. So I mean, not necessarily red meat, but yeah, any kind of refined foods, and particularly fried foods, is quite bad for your intestines because of the bacteria it causes. You do not necessarily need to avoid foods with seeds, such as poppy seeds or anything like that, or popcorn. Uh, Previously, doctors advised to avoid this food because they thought that the small particles of food get trapped into the abnormal pockets. But that's not necessarily the case. I mean, even smaller than pieces of popcorn or poppy seeds is bacteria itself, and that's really the problem itself. That's what's actually causing the infection.